All right. Welcome, guys. This is one of our online monthly Q&A sessions for March 6th, 2024. I'm Caitlin Cameron, the project director for Thrive, which is the education and outreach arm that was created for Ecovillage at Ithaca. And today I'm going to speak a little bit about creating social connection in a community setting. Um, and after the few slides and points I wanted to make about that, we will open it up for questions. So I'll just dive right in if this will cooperate. There we go. So what I'm about to share is again sharing the Ecovillage at Ithaca experience. And it's anecdotal, so this isn't necessarily, based on a survey of other communities, but I would say probably a lot of what we've experienced around how to create social connection would probably be the case in a lot of other places as well. I think something that's unique about Ecovillage at Ithaca is our size. Um, we have the three neighborhoods, which means we have over 200 people here. So there are different scales of our community, and we have those neighborhood scales, which are a little bit more manageable in terms of people getting to know each other, making connections, making decisions. Um, but certainly when you get to that village-wide scale, that's a lot of people. And so it can be a criticism or um, downside to our particular community is people feel they don't always know everyone very well, or just it's not possible to create really deep connections with everyone. So that's, just a particular context that I'm speaking from. But I was going to discuss this idea of social connection in community based on these four categories of what I consider to be ingredients for how to foster some of that. So the first being intention and desire, the second being programming and planning events. The third and a really important one is physical spaces. And then funding, meaning both time and money and a willingness to support creating social connections. So when it comes to intention and desire, certainly most intentional communities are created with some kind of goal around social connection. Um, so that's important to state up front, right? When you're um, creating your community, when you're visioning what you're about. Certainly our community uh, had social connection as a primary goal. Um, and this image is just a handful of folks from our community that came out. The gentleman in the center, the older gentleman with the maroon cardigan, it was his birthday, and so he has this tradition of having a birthday potluck in one of the common houses. Anyone in the village is welcome. It's usually after a community meal, and so people come and celebrate his birthday and get together, and then we take a picture of everyone who's there as a way of trying to document just a snapshot of who's in the community at that time. So I mentioned intention around having social connection or connection and support and belonging as a foundational ingredient here, but there also has to be a desire for people to connect. It can't just be lip service. There needs to be sort of an active um, desire that where there is a continued effort around this kind of connection. So generally, you're hoping people who come here have a desire to know their neighbors, have a desire to connect with people around similar goals. In our case, as an eco-village, community and sustainability tend to be where people have the most common ground. It helps to have that intention and practice of sharing and collaboration. That's another intersection, I would say, of where that social connection can enter in to your relationships. And I think another important one that might not be obvious to everyone at first or from the outside is an understanding and a willingness to treat everything as an opportunity to connect. So I'll get into that a little bit more, but treating a meeting or a work party or working on a cook team for a meal, it's not only about the task at hand or the work that needs to happen, but it's an opportunity to get together, and it helps when people recognize that. Um, so obviously having some curation around this helps. Programming and planned events um, can play a big role in fostering and facilitating connection. This is an image from Thanksgiving last year. So this is the Tree Common House dining room, and there was desire to host a Thanksgiving meal that anyone in the village could participate in. So that's, kind of a classic example of celebrating a holiday or something like that. But some of the considerations around programming would be, private versus community-wide. Obviously, not everything that we do is going to be include the whole community or be a community-wide um, event or program. And I think it's important to have a mix of planned and impromptu ways of connecting. That's a balancing act, I would say. And same for the idea of regular and sporadic. There are certain things where I think it's helpful that they're regular and people know there's going to be a meal every week, and they can count on that as a way of engaging with their neighbors. But certainly you want to leave room for um, sporadic and one-time things to happen as well. So again, some examples that we have, and I would assume a lot of other communities also have these kinds of um, happenings. So work parties and moving parties, you see an image up top from one of the experience weekends actually, where people are helping with gardening and landscaping tasks. And those happen uh, sometimes on a regular basis, sometimes they're more sporadic. It depends on the needs, but certainly people look at that as an opportunity not just to um, take care of whatever work needs to happen, but as an excuse to see their neighbors and get together. I would say meetings are another big one. Of course, meetings have an agenda. There are things that need to happen, decisions that need to be made. Um, but part of I think it's really one of the primary ways that people do get together and connect with their neighborhood. It's kind of an excuse to get together. And certainly if you are going to live in intentional community, there can be a lot of meetings. So you might as well treat that as a way of building those relationships. Another example would be clubs and special interests. This is just a very short list of examples, but what I mean by that are people who form book groups, um, where maybe it's a pretty small group, and they meet on a regular basis, or there's a particular book that some people really want to read, and they put a call out to the whole village. So things like that, where again, there's uh, a specific desire, but it's sort of hosting an opportunity to uh, maybe interact with people you wouldn't see in your own neighborhood or see on a day-to-day basis, where you have common interests. Clothing swaps is something that we do. You could think of other examples similar to that, like recipe swaps or whatever, where you're creating an event around sharing economy, and a lot of socializing tends to happen there. Another one that we have in our community are crafting circles. Um, and that's pretty fun, where you bring projects that you're working on, you hang out in one of the common houses for a couple of hours, and people are, kind of working on their, quilt or whatever. But doing it in a more social setting. Um, and then, some typical ones like yoga or meditation, or people who go on bike rides together, things like that. Um, Obviously, a hallmark of most intentional communities is the community meal. Um, that is a pretty standard and typical way to foster relationships and connections. And that's not only the meal itself when you're sitting down at a table and chatting with your friends and neighbors. It also happens when the cook team is preparing the meal, when the dish crew gets together. So I participate on the dish crew for my neighborhood. And as you're washing and drying the dishes, it really is an opportunity to check in with the folks you're volunteering with, and learn more about them or what's going on for them. Discuss some topic that's happening in the neighborhood that at that time, things like that. So certainly community meals, there's a reason why they're so popular, because it's just a really logical way to bring people together and facilitate smaller group conversations, and a chance to mix and mingle, and maybe connect with people you don't know so well, or things like that. We also have performances and celebrations. Those tend to be the whole neighborhood, and so maybe less intimate ways of connecting. But we have um, recently we had a retirement party for one of our residents, and birthday parties. Again, this could run the gamut from a small sort of private group where people are reserving a common house for a kid's birthday party, or it could be something that's village wide, like one of our residents. Her birthday is on Friday, and she just put an email to the whole village saying, "Hey, I reserved the common house. Um, Anyone's welcome to celebrate with me and stop by." So, um, again, using um, traditions, holidays, milestones as an excuse to get together. Another example might be Shabbat dinners. So we have a group of people who identify as Jewish, and who really enjoy regularly getting together, rotating between people's houses, um, for Friday night Shabbat dinners. So I just really want to emphasize that this isn't always going to be um, things that are planned or programmed officially, like sort of at a village level or a neighborhood level, like sanctioned things. It's that mix of private um, private interests and private groups, and the whole village. Um, and just to wrap this up, so the social events, we will often have happy hours. Um, movie nights, Super Bowl party, Oscar party, housewarming, potlucks, and these kind of fall into that impromptu category. And again, they might be open to the whole village or they might be sort of a select group. And I think that uh, all of those ideas for events and programs I just mentioned really can be dependent on physical spaces and how physical spaces are designed in your community. So this, for example, is one of the common houses in the Frog neighborhood, the dining room for that neighborhood with a community meal going on. Um, and obviously, if you didn't have a common house or a dining room, it'd be really difficult to facilitate that kind of event and that kind of interaction. And I think it's important to consider both indoor and outdoor spaces. Um, we have a lot of things that happen outdoors. And again, that public-private consideration, how are the private homes designed, not only those public amenities. And then I think that it's really important to balance flexible space and specific uses. That's a particular design challenge, especially with communal amenities. So again, the common house is a pretty standard design element for a lot of intentional communities. You see in the bottom here the common house for Frog. And there was the dining room I showed you. All of our common houses also have living rooms. And I think those are really important spaces because you want a space that feels comfortable for people to treat as like an extension of their own private home. So certainly I've had people who say, do you want to get together for a cup of tea and just chat? And we'll use a living room in a common house for that kind of um, connection. You know, sometimes people don't feel comfortable having people in their own private home. So I think one of the advantages of a common house is that it provides an opportunity um, for parties, events, getting together with people where it may be more comfortable for more people. You see up in the top right, that image is actually the sitting room, living room in the Song Common House, and it's flexible enough, it's used for different things. We'll have meetings in that space, book groups will meet there, uh, there's a library in that space, so people might use it just on their own for working or reading. In this case, that's actually a crafternoon, one of our crafting circles where people bring their projects and hang out together. The playrooms are also, you know, an important convening point, right? Providing space specifically for children and families is another way for kids to interact. And I think that's another consideration I didn't mention is intergenerational interaction. Something that's not listed here is the game room that was put in the Song Common House. And in the wintertime, we have a ping pong tournament. And that's another great example of where you have a physical space to enable that. We have a room that has a ping pong table. Um, and it's it starts in the dead of winter when people are less likely to be outside and running into each other or interacting. And so it's a physical space and a programmed event that are kind of coming together to enable um, more one-on-one interactions. And I've heard from people who participate in the tournament that it's really a great chance to spend a half an hour with someone you might not really know that well or interact with much, including different age groups, right? We have some teenagers that like to participate in the ping pong tournaments, and you might not really interact with them otherwise. So, um, same thing with the laundry room, these spaces where um, they're not just about the function of the space, they're also points of interaction that are built in. So, what else do I want to say about that? Outdoor spaces, like this Frog Common House has a patio with tables and chairs and shading. Again, specific, uh, but also flexible. So it can be used for a range of things, but it's not so flexible that it's not useful for anything. Um, some things that are specific to our house design here, that were intentionally designed to foster connection. The houses are close together. You can see in this upper image, that's a duplex, so they're physically close together. Um, and the most of the homes have front porches or stoops or some kind of space where people might be hanging out, and seeing each other walk by, having active spaces and windows and doors facing towards the public space. This is the sort of central pedestrian walkway to the common house over here. So placing the kitchens, the dining rooms, um, and the windows towards where all that internal private activity and public activity are happening and could intersect. And yards and gardens too. We have a lot of people in our community who like to garden. So that's another way that people run into each other and talk to each other is when people are out in their spaces gardening. Um, we also intentionally built meandering pedestrian-only paths. So that is a space that facilitates play for children and also is often where people encounter each other, run into each other, have impromptu interactions and conversations. And then some outdoor amenities that are specific to our community. We have some saunas where people get together and hang out. I didn't mention we have fire circles too. That's another big one, um, having bonfires and fire circles. Trails are really popular. We have a lot of people who walk and talk. So they'll have walking meetings, or maybe when you just first move into the community, people invite you to go for a walk and talk to get to know each other while you walk on the trails. The pond is another really social um, uh, place for kids, but also, parents of kids who are hanging out on the beach, things like that. And we also have playgrounds and play spaces as well where the young kids will get together and um, socialize. Lastly, I just wanted to mention, but not spend a lot of time on the idea of funding. Um, so when communities are forming and thinking about what life they envision together, how they want to live and interact, considering the spaces, the design adaptability, the initial expense and what you can afford to build initially, what might you do in the future, right? Like that maybe not everything has to happen all at once, and you have that adaptability of as needs arise and as you see people are wanting fire circles or wanting a sauna, um, finding a way to enable that in the future. And also maintenance, right? When you start adding all these amenities like trails and saunas, that is an additional cost, both financial and time cost, for residents to maintain. So there is another balance there between how much time are you spending having to take care of things and maintain things, versus some of the other goals or priorities you might have in the community. So here's just a picture of a work party in one of our community gardens. The community gardens are another space that I didn't mention, where you really can interact with folks. And I happen to be part of a group gardening effort where people pooled together their resources, and we would get together at a particular time each week to garden together. So that's another idea. Um, but I guess you really have to think about what people's commitment level and comfort level are when it comes to how much time they want to spend together, how much desire is there to to work on things together, interact with each other. You do need a few leaders and social connectors who are going to be the ones who schedule the happy hour or who take initiative to plan events. We have a community life committee, for example, that does those sort of bigger community-wide events. Um, and so a couple ways that some of that gets funded. We have budgets for obviously for physical expenses like building infrastructure or buildings. But we also have what are called buckets where we have funding sources and residents can propose um, physical projects or social ideas. So some money can go towards birthday parties, for example. There was a proposal to have a monthly celebration for people whose birthdays are in that month, and there's a little bit of bucket money to buy the food and those kinds of things. So yeah, that's just a, a small side consideration, I guess, is are there ways where time, money, person labor, person hours are uh, a part of what keeps that running. So last slide, and then we can turn it over to discussion. So uh, something that I learned pretty quickly and I've heard from other residents is that even though you have all this stuff going on, like all these events, programs, meals, um, a lot of times it can still feel pretty superficial in terms of how well you know people. So there have also been more targeted strategies to facilitate deepening relationships. One of those is a deepening group. So we um, form sort of randomly assign people to a deepening groups, and they sort of commit for 6 months or a year to get together and spend time together and really get to know each other. But that's something to be aware of is that even if you're moving to an intentional community or um, have that desire and intention to get to know people, it can take work and extra effort or intention to get to know people really well. One strategy we've adopted for meetings to add that extra layer of connection is check-ins. That's a practice from sociocracy where at the beginning of the meeting, everyone checks in on where they're at or how they're doing, or sometimes there'll be a fun question about, what's your favorite spring flower or something. But it's a way of just having a little bit more interpersonal connection in a meeting. Sharing rides and that kind of setting, I've noticed is another way I've gotten to know people. Like I might be walking to the bus and someone offers me a ride and I just get, that 5 to 10 minutes to really connect with that person, learn about what's going on for them that day, and that kind of thing. So that's just another literal vehicle to get to know people or commuting, carpooling. We also have specialty groups where we use WhatsApp or email listservs or forums for families, for example. So like the families have really been buoyed by having a specific WhatsApp channel and having potlucks and ways for that subsect of our community to really connect and share resources and play dates and things like and childcare and things like that. So there's communication tools and intention around supporting specific demographics or connecting specific demographics that also happen. All right, so I'll just mention while I've got the slides up that our next lunch break Q&A will be in 2 months, actually in May, on May 1st. And that's going to be with David McCobb, who's a founding member of Song, or Second Neighborhood. And he is really specializing in the conversation around eco-spirituality. So that will be our guest speaker for May. And our socials and website can be found here, as well as my email if you need to get in touch with me. And I will stop there and see if you guys want to discuss any of that or have any other questions that have come up for you, or anything else that might be of interest to talk about.
I was just curious, even like it looks like there's a lot of intention goes into keeping people mixed up and knowing as many people as possible.
Hmm.
Still find people like tend towards the little, like sitting at the same table at the community meal, or
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it really depends on the person. So there's some people who are very social butterfly types, and definitely spend time in all three neighborhoods, or really like to like move between tables and things like that. And then yeah, certainly there's not cliques per se, but yeah, people have their friend groups or the people that they um know that they like to talk to, or I think I also mix it up. So if there's someone I haven't talked to in a while, I might sit with them. Or if people have, um, a specific thing they wanted to discuss, they might sit next to those folks. So it varies. But certainly you see people hanging out with the same people, the way that you would with the friends that you know well. I think the other phenomenon that I see is there is not silo isn't the right word, but certainly neighborhoods um have a pull, like you're more likely to know more people and spend more time with people in your own neighborhood, because you're going to meetings together, because those are the people you're seeing on the path in front of your house. So I'd say there's a little bit of a bias towards that, but again, it really depends on what kind of person you are, how extroverted you are, that kind of thing. Yeah. So what was I gonna say? Oh, kids and teenagers. So something else I've noticed is teenagers will get together to play Dungeons and Dragons or video games or things like that, and they'll often be using the common house spaces for that. Um, so and there are groups of younger kids too that will be, outside together. So yeah, they're uh it's tricky with kids because certainly when there are other kids your age so close, then it makes it easy for them to connect if they get along, right? But it's also kind of a small pool. So if you're a teenager and you happen to not really get along with the other teenagers, then that might feel ostracizing sometimes to sort of see them hanging out and you're not. So it's kind of a mixed bag in that regard, um, for the kids and the teenagers. But, I certainly see a lot of the families spending time together and connecting, right? Because they just have a lot in common in terms of what's going on in their phase of life, and things like that. So that's another sort of uh, natural affinity group that I see at meals together, and um, yeah, things like that. We're a small group today, Elan.
Oh, yeah, hello there.
Yeah,
So I don't know if you,
yeah, hi,
you
go ahead.
know where we are up here.
Yeah,
Okay,
well,
thank you. I'm
Ethan is
Robbie.
hi Robbie, I'm Caitlin. Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
Do you want to share
Yeah,
anything
I've
about
enjoyed what you've been.
Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I appreciated your focus on that activities happen as an opportunity for getting together even more than the project itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in when this is what a work day is. We got to get this done. We got to get that done.
Right, right.
Um,
Yeah,
and to use it as an opportunity to be together more than just the potluck that's afterwards.
right, right. Yeah, it's a
And it's
balancing
quite
act,
amazing
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite amazing to hear the difference between, say, ours being a community of 20 people
Hmm.
and yours being 200.
Right.
And so the pool of opportunity and what you can do, whereas in many ways we're dependent more on the outside community to do certain activities,
I see.
which at least there were. We moved up here in 1969, and in that time period, there were a lot of people who moved up as back to the land and homesteading, and a lot of those connections are still vibrant, and it's drawn more as contrasted to the community that was here since 1858.
Mm-hmm.
I think first settlers pretty much. But we're getting closer to them because it's well, a lot of them are my age,
Mm-hmm.
and then younger, and mixing's going on more than was originally,
Mm-hmm.
and becoming more friendly rather than you're different.
Do you find that having you said it's how many people are in your community?
Um, Ethan says 24. I quit
24.
counting.
Right. So I would imagine I think that is a difference with our community compared to a lot of other communities which tend to be more the size that you guys are. When you only have 24 people or 30 households or whatever, um
Mhm.
yeah, I guess there's probably more not pressure, but need or desire for everyone to at least get along, right? Or to
Sure.
right, to find common ground. Obviously, I'm assuming not everyone's best friends with each other, but I would imagine
Mhm.
it's a even more close-knit kind of relationship when it's that number of people.
Can be.
Hmm.
Some get closer, and some really like to be more isolated.
Hmm.
Like I had Christine and I had 30 years in this house, which
Hmm.
and then and it essentially was downtown Morningglory, and everyone was stopping here to pay their bills and connect on this and that and use this and that, and after that many years, when we had the opportunity, we moved uphill and
Hmm.
left the house to Ethan.
Hmm.
And it's really nice having some space over 10 years.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, I had 10 years before that, 30 years, where I was more really integrated into the community. And now it's so I used to be below the orchard, and now I'm above the orchard.
Hmm.
And I put a lot of time and energy in the orchard. So those are also my children and my friends.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's you raise a good point that I didn't talk about, which is that sort of open door policy that you know we don't necessarily have as much of that anymore, but I think that does happen a lot, right? Where you might have a particular household where all the kids hang out there, or uh, that's someone's door is always open or you're always welcome to stop by. And I
Mhm,
think that's important too to have people um who are like that, right? Who are so welcoming and open and
mhm.
where people feel free to sort of come and go and hang out.
Yeah, we sort of have that now. Well, Ethan's brother Daryl built this big house with their four kids, and then decided to move to New York City.
Okay.
And so we've adopted the house as a community center. So it's got a big playroom. It's got a big room we can dance in, and big kitchen that we can cook, and a washing machine and a shower, because we're all off grid. And
Right.
um, and it has Wi-Fi there.
What are
So
some
it's
examples? Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I was just curious, what are some examples in your community of how people get together? Do you have community meals or like particular events or happenings that are a part of your culture to connect?
Well, we were having regular Friday night dancing, but then this and that and the other thing happened, and that broke up.
Mm-hmm.
But that was doing quite well and could get back together. We have every week we have a meeting, and it's been a rotation of every other week being a business meeting, and then every other week being a work meeting or a check-in
Mm-hmm.
with alternating facilitators. Except the work meeting is usually has the same person or with an assistant organizing that, and then followed by a potluck. So those who feel like getting together and eating together do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that those are the main ones. Ethan has a outdoor dance that he puts on
Mm-hmm.
every Thursday pretty well, except when it's too cold.
Mm-hmm.
Um, what else do you think of, Ethan? Well, sometimes during the winter there's the Monday night. There has Monday night. Oh, Monday night. Yeah, we for a while there we're having regular Wednesday night
Mm-hmm.
mending and crafting nights
Mm-hmm.
with a potluck,
Mm-hmm.
and that's always been fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some
Yeah,
really
that
fine craftspeople here.
yeah, that seems to be popular the last few years. I'm seeing more, excuse me, more and more of people coming together around mending, repair, crafting, those kinds of things. I didn't talk about COVID, but certainly COVID um, really negatively impacted our community. I'm sure most communities when it came to being able to connect and socialize and get together. For a while, all of the common houses were shut down. There weren't community meals
Mm,
happening. People were basically isolated in their own homes. And that really, I wasn't here at the time, so I'm basing on what other people have told me. But yeah, I think that's when it became really clear how important outdoor spaces can be as well. And having
mhm.
ways for people to gather or do things together outdoors became even more uh, prominent or important.
Right. We well, we had one thing that reminds me, we do have a regular sauna, but it's sort of more sporadic. It's two or three people who put it on and then let people know when it's happening.
Hmm.
Wood fired and
Hmm.
lots of space. Um, COVID, we sort of set up. We felt like people were going to ask, so we set up a protocol, and mostly it was followed. Um, we're sort of out of sight, out of mind in the local community, and there was one woman who pretty much withdrew, and because she figured she'd been smoking and wanted to protect her lungs, so she's especially concerned about being in the same house where there's kids who go to public school. But otherwise, we just pretty well carried on as normal. We figured we were, I don't know what you call it, just one pod of some kind,
Hmm.
and just carried on life as normal. And personally, I was really enjoying not going out much and doing more in the garden and the orchard
Hmm. Hmm.
and other projects, walking in the woods, keeping up with some correspondence. And I wrote a book, so I've been selling the book, and that
Hmm.
was an opportunity for that.
Sure. Um,
Mhm.
does anyone else have have something they want to add
Yeah.
on
Social
social
connections.
connection or anything else related to community? Elan, did you have anything specific you wanted to talk about?
Well, I mostly haven't been to the lunch. I'm a neighbor at
Mhm.
Ecovillage. I mostly haven't been to any of these sessions for a while, and I wanted to get a feel for what you're doing and what the interest is, and I'm excited about it. I think mostly what I would say about relationships here right now is um, we're in a phase where there's a lot of vitality and reaching out. There's just a lot of small group things that happen. There's a lot of networks that happen that aren't on the main listserv. So for something that's been around since the early 1990s, I'm thrilled that we have so much aliveness and vitality. I mean, we do have a lot of turnover,
Mhm.
but we're turning over into very high energy people who are eager to connect and eager to contribute. And once you've got that kind of spirit, it makes it easy for things to happen. A lot of things happen just without a lot of work. Um, so I feel like we're reaping the rewards of all these decades of, slowly undoing our individualistic conditioning. Um, and it could have gone another way. It could have been that we had our heyday and now it's starting to age out, or people are starting to lose the vision, but it's not true. It's really very exciting.
Yeah,
And
that's a
also
great
have
point. Thank you.
something I got to get to at one. So, but I'm
Okay.
listening to you. What were you going to say?
No, I said that's a great point. I hadn't really uh thought about it that way or mentioned that, so I appreciate that. I do notice that a lot of when people first move here, myself included, yeah, there is that more of that energy, right? And I'm making a general statement, but that is another trend when people are new and they're really excited about being in this place is when you really see that effort and desire going into making connections and getting to know people and initiating
Hmm.
projects or yeah, things like that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to sign out. This has been great.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thanks for stopping by.
Good to meet you.
Okay.
Yeah, I suppose we could wrap up unless there's anything else, any other questions or comments.
I'm curious with social interconnections,
Hmm.
whether you have like a certain demographic, like there's a certain demographic. I visited there somewhere in the last 10 years,
Hmm.
and um, it costs a certain amount to be able to join, and so you're sort of limiting your without intention, but by practicality, limiting what kind of people can come.
Sure.
And so you have certain commons to begin with, and which may make social connections easier.
Yeah, that's
But
fair. So bye, Mark. So, yeah, I think that
hi, Mark.
yes, it's true that as a a more middle class type housing development, then yeah, there might be that more common ground for a lot of folks around educational attainment or um, just kind of background experiences. Not to say we don't have diversity of different kinds, right? Religious diversity, age diversity. We have a pretty high uh, percentage of our population is LGBTQ plus. We also have uh, a kind of high number of households that are single parent households. So, so yeah, I would say certainly people find each other on some of those levels, right? Whether I mentioned families, but also We have an elder group that's forming. I mentioned the teenagers. We have LGBTQ plus kind of events and parties that will happen. Like the Jewish community will get together. So there, I guess, different ethnographic or cultural um, points where people will find each other. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I think for me, where I get the most diversity when it comes to like interacting with people is the age range, because I wouldn't necessarily in my past lives have much interaction with children or with people who are retirees. So I think for me, that's one of where I see some of that benefit of in terms of demographics, like that having the opportunity um, to have intergenerational relationships.
That throws up.
Well, should we wrap up or?
I have one more question.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
The internet froze there for a moment, so I
Oh,
missed your
okay,
last words.
sorry.
But that's I'm curious. So you've been there 30 years or
hmm
more,
hmm
and you've had children as a community, and have the children stayed? Have the
Yeah,
children been able?
that's a really fascinating question. Yeah, I think there are one or two people out there in the sort of the movement of intentional community that are studying that question of, how many people who grow up in community stay in community or move back to community. So we have let's see, somewhere it's a small number, let's say three households where there are adult children that grew up here and are still have either come back or are still living in the same household as their parents. We There are a couple of households um where the children will come back occasionally, but haven't necessarily like purchased a home or committed to kind of staying and being a member. And there are a few families where their adult children are in the Ithaca area or live nearby, um, and might eventually want to live here when they start to raise families. But as people in their 20s, like I would say the demographic where we're most underrepresented is that sort of young adult 20s age range because of the affordability, because it's a little bit isolated and not as happening as an urban environment might be. Um, so yeah, I don't know that we've got anyone yet who has stayed or has like come back and moved back in as an adult. Exactly. Um, Yeah, and as from what I understand, that's like I've met people who grew up in community and have said like ne I will never live in co-housing as an adult, right? Or they're kind of soured on the idea. So I don't know um if that's a trend or if that's just, you know, very personal or what. But how about in your community? Do you have people who've come back or decided to stay?
He since decided to stay so far.
hmm hmm
And he was born in this house, and he's still here 35 years later.
hmm Yeah,
So,
I think the other unique thing about our community is that we have three neighborhoods that were built incrementally over time. So it's true that the first neighborhood was, started about 30 years ago, and there were a lot of children um in the beginning in the 90s. But the character of demographics in each neighborhood varies depending on when they were built. So our third neighborhood, which was completed about 10 years ago, uh, tends to be older people, like retirees and single person households who, and that neighborhood's only 10 years old. So like we didn't really have kids um, growing up in that neighborhood, uh, except for, in the last 10 years. So we have, I guess what I'm saying is we have sort of three different sample sizes or three different, three different scenarios of
Mhm.
different ages that we're working from.
Well, that keeps getting more fascinating.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I admire what you're doing.
Yeah,
We
thanks.
also,
Yeah. You know,
I lived
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I lived on the farm for, I guess it was 3 months in Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when it was 1,200 people. It was
Yeah,
like maybe a year or two before it imploded
right.
down to 700 and then down more.
Right.
So so I got the experience of a large community,
Yeah.
uh, and also lived for, I guess, well, I don't know how many months it was out in California in Table Mountain Ranch back in
Okay.
70, 76, 77.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a 10-year-old community at that time, and was well, probably at least 30 or 40 people with schools and everything isolated away from the coast.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so
Yeah,
yeah, the whole
I,
yeah,
you know,
people coming together and living together.
right. I think that, I would say when communities have been around as long as some of these communities have, um, there do seem to be kind of like cycles or waves of things, right? And it depends on, yeah, like if there's strong leadership or if, what the culture of the place is and the age of the people and is it a popular place for people to come or do you lose people? So I think we've been pretty successful in that it's continued to be a popular place for people. Like people seem to want to come here. Um, and I think part of that is our locate, even though Ithaca is a small place and it's not a big city, it is a college town, so there is that anchor, and it's also we're in a suburban or rural setting, but we're very close to the amenities of the town. So I think that is one of the draws for people is that you kind of have both best of both worlds. But certainly we haven't, I wouldn't say that we've perfected uh everything. I talked today about ways of building social connection, but certainly people people get wrapped up in their own lives, right? There's still that very like American, independent, individualistic um thing where people are not always contributing or not always attending things and then it's like, well, why did you move to community if you weren't gonna participate? So, I think most communities have some of those struggles, right? Of like how to yeah, how to get things done and how to keep things going and how to make it a place where people actually want to be um and want to actually connect with each other and work through these things together. So the
Yeah,
experiment
I liked
continues.
your early comments. That people were coming because they wanted to connect and to build community,
Hmm.
and that's such a different than coming and going. Well, I've got a place that's comfortable to live in with nice neighbors, but I got my own life to live.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I
that's
think a
been a
lot,
challenge here too.
yeah, I think that I think certainly the physical design of the community can really impact that, right? If you're living in co-living where you're all in the same building, that's a very different experience than there's some eco villages and communities where everyone's got like a 1 acre lot, and people are spaced out and I have a hard time imagining like making myself participate and engage with people. Like you have to really be motivated if you are not physically interacting with, if the design of the place isn't putting you together, right? And having you run
Yeah.
into each other and interact. That's my two
Yeah.
cents about it, but there are a lot of factors, of course.
No, that makes a lot of sense. In the beginning, there was someone here whose brother had been part of the Libre community in New Mexico or
Mhm.
Colorado, and their idea was to, have space between. And so we seem to have done a lot of that. That we have, I guess, 5 dwellings close to each other,
Mhm.
and one in your site. But then we have a bunch that are like a whole completely different and apart, and so it's harder to have reasons to come together. To That's where you, as you're saying, to find events that are regular that you can count on to draw each other
Right.
together
Yep.
and have more fun.
Yeah, we like the
Good for you.
intentionality and the effort that seems to go into making it work. So that's what we've been impressed with.
I like how this is helping you connect, with what's happening and what can
Yeah.
happen and what has happened while you're still in Rochester.
We're working on that.
Yeah, well that was one of the intentions with hosting these sessions was to give an opportunity for people to connect with us. So um yeah.